Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. This is a webinar, the second one in a series of 5 that's called Bioeconomy in Our Daily Life. And this one is called What the Tree Can Do. It's part of the Bloom project. That's an European project that aims to bring together partners from across Europe to debate, communicate, and engage the public and different stakeholders in the potential of bioeconomy. Bloom, boosting European citizen knowledge and awareness of bioeconomy, research and innovation. So, in this webinar, we want to share some perspective of what the tree can do. There will be a short presentations with some experts, followed by questions and a panel discussion. We have some housekeeping rules. In this webinar, we use the chat only for technical questions. And if you have, which I hope you have, some questions for us about bioeconomy and forest bioeconomy especially, you can write them in the Q&A. You find that one in the Zoom window, the Q&A, talking bubbles. So you can write your question there. You can be anonymous if you want to. And the whole project, Bloom project, is working to make dialogue, as I said. And if we have good dialogue, then there's no such thing as a stupid question. And today we are this group of people joining from the Bloom team. The What a Tree Can Do seminar is coordinated by the Nordic Hub in collaboration with the Dutch Hub. And here you see some of us. My name is Lotta Westerberg Thomasson, as you can see at last at this slide. And I'm a communication strategist at VA, Public and Science in Sweden. But we are not in focus. Today we are talking to some experts of forest bioeconomy all over Europe. And I would really love to see if you have answered some of the Menti questions before we start. My colleague, Maria, could you please show us if you have some results from the Menti?
Yes, so what we see, they have at least 20 of our participants. Welcome to all of you, and most of you are actually coming from Finland. And we had Netherlands second running up, but we also have participants joining us from Scotland, Ukraine, Italy, Poland, and even India. And of course, Sweden, where we are situated, and Germany. So welcome to all of you. Austria also, welcome.
That's nice. Do we have the other?
Yes. So from which part of society are you all from? The major part of you actually comes from the scientific community, but we also have a large part coming from the business and industry, as well as some students. Welcome to you, teachers, some policymakers and NGOs, and some media and communication representatives. So you're all very welcome to this webinar.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, this is Kirsi. So in chat, we see that there is also a participant from Norway and Macedonia. Great, welcome.
We have one question more in the Menti that you could answer if you want, and it's to get a bit of a common ground. That's what you think of when you think about the word forest bioeconomy. Do we have some answers there?
The main answers at the moment are sustainability, sustainable paper, energy, wood, biodiversity, replace fossil materials.
Welcome to you all. And now we should present our first expert here. This is Katarina Torvinen, Research Manager from VTT Technical Research Center of Finland. I'm so glad that you can join us today, and you're going to talk about cellulose fibers. And yeah, I leave the word to you. Please, welcome.
Thank you, Lotta. Okay, hopefully you see now my screen as well.
Yes, it works.
Thanks, Lotta, for your kind introduction. And also welcome to this webinar on my behalf. So I will talk today shortly to you about cellulose fibers and also the ongoing product developments and opportunities related to cellulose fibers. Okay, so I will start to saying that at VTT we do not do the science and research for their own sake. So at this moment in this challenging world, we are tackling the greatest challenges in the world. So this we do together with our customers and our other stakeholders and collaborators. And together we are creating sustainable growth and competitive advantage in this process. And thinking about some challenges of today, there is of course a growing significant this kind of awareness of this kind of environmental effects of the plastics. And this is powering bans and also this kind of statements due to the plastic use. There is of course critical to develop circulation systems. So that means all the value chain about the sorting, about the collecting and recycling and reusing of plastics. But at the same time, there is a lot of potential to develop alternative materials for plastics. There we have to keep in our mind that we don't want environmental hurdles to be created. So, for example, the case of the microplastics, we have to consider all the time when we are developing new materials that they don't cause that kind of problems. So, and we really think that wood cellulose, or it can be also other biomass cellulose, but especially in Finland, we are really keen about the wood cellulose material. We believe that that is really opportunity to be this kind of super material in the future. And why is that? That is because it's really ecological alternative for the plastics, for the chemicals, for the composites materials. It will grow and actually it will bind carbon and then reduce at the same time carbon emissions. And it will mitigate to the climate change. And what is the most important here is that we can even develop properties beyond nowadays plastics materials. So we believe that there is unexpected superior functional properties available. And in overall, cellulose is also the most abundant polymer in the world. And it's naturally biodegradable and it's easily recyclable and repulpable. And if we want really to reduce our carbon emissions and help the climate change situation, we need to replace fossil-based materials, and the wood cellulose is the most promising alternative in both in fiber and also in polymer mode. We have already examples of nowadays world. So traditionally, if we think about cellulose, it's mostly used in paper and board in packaging application and in hygiene products. But the variety of the opportunities has grown really a lot in these recent years. And we have already really nice this kind of smaller and also medium-sized companies growing in Finland, and also these applications can be other than packaging applications. So, for example, these wood-based cellulose textile fibers are emerging technologies in Finland in many ways. So there is a lot of activities on that field. There is this kind of dissolving technologies with solvents, and also non-dissolved cellulose-based fibers. Like one example is the Spinnova, which is spin-off company of VTT. So they are producing non-dissolved textile fibers based on the mechanically produced microfibrillated cellulose and their unique spinning technology. There is also possibilities for the construction materials and medical applications as well available already. Then when we think about really the mitigation of due to climate change and meeting the targets for climate, we have made estimation calculation at VTT, so how we can actually achieve that. So if we do collaboration with different kind of stakeholders and boundaries and really build together ecosystems and new these kind of high value products, it's possible even in Finland to increase the total export of the forest-based materials and value of them. And at the same time, it will grow the GDP in Finland. There we have to concentrate to develop materials which have the higher value. And the examples are like textiles, like biocomposites, like building and construction materials, as well cellulose-based electronics. That is really also emerging possibilities there. I will show you now some examples of what we have already done. So first example is about the packaging materials. This is a really winning concept. So this is like monomaterial multi-layer structure application to this kind of, for example, dry food materials packaging. We have used there two different kind of cellulosic material. The one is thermoplastic cellulose, so it's this kind of modified cellulose esterification of the cellulose, and there we can actually achieve the needed barrier properties. We have used also nanocellulose film between the thermoplastic cellulose layers, and the nanocellulose film is actually also our new material, which is this kind of high consistency enzymatically produced nanocellulose. So this has actually won many already challenges and awards. Then we have technology which is foam forming. In really keep it simple, the foam forming means that we add air bubbles also to the water with water in when we make the paper or board, or it can be even more than that. So we have actually demonstrated many new kind of applications as well with this foam forming. So the idea of the using air bubbles is that then we prevent the flocculation of the fibers, and we can actually at the same time achieve energy and material savings. And this actually brings us to this kind of really new applications, making thick or porous materials, as well as this kind of non-wovens materials, which are not possible with the traditional water forming. And the third and my last example of this kind of new cellulose fiber materials is nanocellulose applications. Nanocellulose is really this kind of enabler in many different kind of applications. We have already that in many packaging applications and also in cosmetics and this kind of emulsions. But it can be more and more. So of course, some of these are really in the lower technology readiness level yet, but we see a lot of opportunities also in these electronic devices and optical structures, as well as for example, capturing microplastics, capturing hormones from the water, so using it to have more cleaner water and air, as well as in textiles and diagnostics membranes. There is a lot of possibilities. So I will end my presentation here and just wanting you to know that it's not just that we use cellulose fibers to replace fossil-based materials, but we are really creating some superior materials with an unexpected properties. And those we believe that we can actually be really competitive in many different kind of material applications in future. So thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, I'm happy to try to provide answers for those.
Thank you, Katarina. Really interesting. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. And I have one question, because you showed a lot of interesting examples, but what kind of products do you see has the best commercial potential of these cellulose-based products?
Yeah, if you think about this year and this moment, I think the packaging applications are the most relevant and the most biggest one at this moment, but what are really in high volume as well, they are these textile fibers. So I would say that those ones are in the high volumes are the most relevant ones now.
We're going to talk, we have some questions about the sustainability of the wood and tree to use all this new materials. We're going to talk about that a bit later in the panel discussion and so on. So I think we do it like this, that we listen to our next speaker and we can talk a bit later. So we have a lot of questions in the Q&A now, and we try to answer them as quick as we can. And now, and say welcome to our next expert, Richard Gosling from Wageningen Food and Bio-Based Research. You're going to talk about lignin products. Please, welcome. Let's hear what you have to say.
Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome also from Holland. Well, welcome again. I'm Richard Gosling, and today I'm going to talk about lignin products from research to demonstration. And two applications will be mentioned there, bioasphalt and also thermoset resins. And at the end, I will talk a little bit about our lignin network, which we are running nowadays in Europe. I'm actually working at Wageningen Food and Bio-Based Research, which is an applied research organization to work together in multidisciplinary teams to find solutions for companies in the bioeconomy. We have possibilities to do research on lab scale, but also going to pilot scale. And we have a strong connection with the university departments of Wageningen, which gives us a very good research environment. Half of my colleagues are working at food-related research, and the other half are working on bio-based products like lignin. What is lignin and why is it interesting? Well, lignin is a main component of lignocellulosic biomass, like wood, but also straw and grasses or herbaceous biomass are also belonging to that group. It is a large side stream of the pulp and paper industry, and also in the upcoming biorefinery industry for the production of bioethanol, but also biochemicals. There's a huge availability of lignin, although nowadays not all the lignin is used as a product, but mainly used as energy source to feed the processing for energy. Lignin has very interesting properties, like a natural binder in the woody tree, to give it more resistance to the environment. It is also more water resistant than other components like cellulose. It has an aromatic rinse structure, which you can see on the slide. It gives also UV stabilization in the tree, but that can also be one of the components or the functionalities for which you can use lignin in a product. And lignin resembles quite some products which are originated from fossil resources, which I will highlight in one of the applications. And valorization of lignin is really interesting for biorefineries to make it more economically feasible. Because if you use lignin for energy, it has a certain value. But if you put it into a product like a material or a chemical, your value will increase substantially. At Wageningen Food and Bios Research, we do a lot of research on, among others, lignin as one of the natural biopolymers. And we look at the different type of lignin, because lignin is not just one biopolymer, but a whole class of different structures depending on botanical origin and processing. We can do conversion, we can functionalize the lignin to meet the requirements for different applications. And you can see in the slides several interesting applications which are under development, and some of those are already at high TRL level. For instance, polyurethane foams, resins, an additive for polymers, rubbers, and also asphalt. If we look at the potential for lignin production versus the use of lignin in all kind of markets, all kind of products, then you can see in this slide, in the blue boxes, we have several types of lignins. As you can see here, you have the craft lignin, which is basically the lignin which is abundantly available, and also the one which is available as a product. And here we have a lot of different, in the green box, a lot of different applications with different values and different market volumes. And you can see here that bitumen, for instance, is a bulky application at relatively low value, around 400, 500 euros per ton. While for phenolic resins, you can see here, it is a reasonable market, around 1 million tons per year, but at a much higher price, around 1,000 euros per ton. Then I will highlight two applications. One is asphalt, where we would like to use lignin as a bitumen substitute. And the reason for that is that we expect scarcity of bitumen in the near future, because a lot of oil refineries are not producing bitumen anymore. They change their processing to get more lights, more fuels. And of course, we would like to maintain our binder quality. So we are looking for a real substitute for this fossil resource. One of the advantages of using lignin is that it's also a possibility to store for a long time in the road, and also including recycling for really a long period, that we can store biogenic carbon. So we take the carbon out of the air and store it in a material. Also with lignin, we have the possibility to add extra functionality into asphalt, that it is not only using to substitute bitumen, but that we also get extra functionality, like maybe a longer durability or longer lifetime. And a longer lifetime really means less maintenance, and in the maintenance of a road, there are a lot of costs are associated with. So there is the real business case. We talk about a large market, a huge market. In Europe is around 50 million tons bitumen used every year. So what we did in this application, we show that it is possible to use lignin and bitumen in a mix, in a blend, and that we can reduce the bitumen content with 50%. So that's really a lot in this application. First, we started with lab scale test, as you can see in the slide, small blocks, which were tested in accelerated durability test and weathering test. Then after approval of the requirements, we got to the demonstration phase, where you can see that we made small lanes of bioasphalt of about 10 square meters, which is already quite a lot if you consider that in your backyard. And finally, we were able to produce a lot of demonstration roads in the Netherlands, about 12 in total at the moment. And the first one was already paved in 2015. So nowadays we have 5 years experience in real outdoor application and testing of this demonstration road. The demonstration road in 2015 is on an industrial road, which is loaded with a lot of heavy trucks and cars. The other one highlighted in the left is at the Wageningen campus, where we have the first cycling path paved in 2017 with different types of lignin in different sections. And that cycling path is behaving very well during the last 3 years. If you look at what kind of lignins we have tested, we screened a lot of different ones from the pulp and paper industry, but also from the biorefinery industry. And depending on the test and the requirements we got, we can select the most suitable ones. For example, soda, kraft and hydrolysis straw lignin, which are really used in this application at the Wageningen campus. And you can see in the slide that the dry strength is always higher than the wet strength. But to be able to put it in this application, you should at least retain the dry strength for 80% during underwater testing. And that's really severe testing. And most of the lignins are able to meet those requirements. But you can also see that, for example, hydrolysis poplar did not meet these requirements. I briefly talk about additional functionality, and there we can also see in these results that we can also meet these requirements like fatigue resistance, track formation, and also durability, which are, of course, important parameters to use lignin in this application. Then the second application is on thermosetting resins, and thermosetting resin are already used for a long period, especially in panel and boards where you would like to use the panels under humid conditions or outdoor conditions. We're talking about a market of roughly 1 million tons per year based on phenol formaldehyde resins. And the reason to use lignin is to substitute fossil phenol to reduce formaldehyde, which is a toxic cross-linker. And lignin has a structure which resembles the structure of phenol formaldehyde. We typically see that softwood lignin has a favorable cross-linking ability, which means that it can be used to synthesize a lignin-based resin. We see already that in 2006 there was some commercial activity on this, substituting 30% of the phenol in a typical lignin phenol formaldehyde resin. And in 2019 we saw that several companies are able to produce 50% replacement of phenol by lignin in different applications. I will come back to that in a minute. The challenge still is the reactivity of the lignin, because lignin as a biopolymer has lower reactivity than phenol, for instance. For this application, we work together with Drzewa in the Netherlands. Drzewa is a well-known company producing high-pressure laminates, very strong panels for outdoor use and tables or lab tables, for instance. We started with selection of the different lignin sources and also look at the synthesis, because it's really important to develop a novel synthesis where you use lignin, phenol and formaldehyde together to produce high quality resin materials. After full testing over the years, Drzewa was able to run pilot scale runs a few years ago, and finally in 2019 a commercialization of this application was done by ARPA, one of the subsidiaries of Drzewa in Italy. They call it HPL Phoenix Bloom product. You can find more information on the internet as well, which really shows a lower environmental footprint by using lignin, and 50% of phenol has been replaced by lignin. And it also results in a lower addition of formaldehyde in the synthesis. So these are very good examples of using lignin as a side product of biorefinery. And yeah, those applications are already at commercial material level or at demonstration level. We see also that the industry is more eager to invest in lignin extraction, because if you would like to fulfill all the substitution of biobitumen or phenol, we need a lot of lignin. And lignin valorization is really essential to make biorefineries more economic feasible. Of course, we still have challenges, like we need a lot of lignin, so you have to develop new value chains and also meet the demand and supply. Further on, if we are going to think about the next level, substituting a higher rate of phenol or a higher rate of bitumen, we also need more reactivity of the lignin. So the lignin should be more suitable for those higher substitution rates. And of course, we need a lot of demonstration roads or demonstration products to really see how it behaves in practice, how it behaves in the user phase. Well, to meet all the challenges, we started a ligno cost network, which is actually a cost action. And you can find more information in this slide on our website. And if persons are interested in knowing more about lignin valorization, please contact us. Maybe it would be nice to attend this network.
Perfect. Thank you, Rikard.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have two different questions here. In lignin is used for the energy at the moment in the factories that produce pulp. So how well could these other applications of lignin compete with this, you think? Yes,
the base case is still using lignin for energy application in the current mills. But we know that in a mill, it can be designed that 20% of the lignin can be extracted without disturbing the energy balances in the current mills. For new mills, and you see that it is really happening, that they are more thinking about co-production of cellulose, sugars, and lignin. So there you have a different design, making use of other energy balances and also the possibility to co-produce different products.
Thank you. We are coping with your questions in the Q&A and try to answer as many as we can. But now we need to move forward to our next expert. So, welcome, Josefin Illegård. You're a researcher and platform coordinator at TreeSearch, and you're going to talk a bit about overall about new materials from the forest and what we can look forward to in the future. There's so much research going on, isn't it?
Yes, I will only be able to talk about a few examples of what we can see in the future. There is so much to choose from. So, as Lotta said, my name is Josefin Illegård, and I'm a researcher at KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. I'm mostly working with the collaboration platform TreeSearch. So this is actually my forest. And even though we're not planning to cut down the trees now, I'm going to show you that maybe in the future when we cut down the trees, what can we do from that? So TreeSearch is a collaboration platform. It's a kind of network for Swedish researchers that supports and gathers the research. And I will, but the result I will present will be mostly from a research center called Wallenberg Wood Science Center. And not all of the results will be from that, but even though the researchers are mostly connected to that. So this is kind of the starting point for our research, the tree, of course. So what we're trying to do now in research is that we're trying to understand the tree down to nanoscale level. We still don't know everything about the tree, although we have been performing research for quite some long time. So now we're down at the nanoscale level and see what components we can use to make new materials. So we can say that we go from microscale to nanoscale, and then we want to go to nanoscale to our microscale to our materials. So you can do, of course, find a lot of components in there. We have heard some of them just before, about lignin. So I will talk some about Nano Cellars is that kind of is the smallest fibers or fibrils, smaller than fibers, that you can find in wood. That the wood cell wall is made of when you look at. So it's basically, if you have a pulp fiber and divide it into the smallest parts, then you get nanocellars. And when you go down to nanoscale, and it's nanoscale in width, the length could differ a little bit, you get very interesting properties. So here you, for instance, if you would have the nanocellulose on your bench in a sample, it would look like this. It would look like a gel, because it takes up a lot of water. So what can you make out of it? Well, although the first examples of this, what you could make of nanocellulose was to use in foodstuff, such as ice cream, you can do much more. Of course, we can make a paper out of it. We can make even the world's strongest paper. Although it is strong for being a paper, if you would look at the individual fibrils, they are much stronger. So how, if we want to make a strong material, how could we use this nanocellulose fibrils to make a strong material? Well, if you look at this electron microscopy image down to the right, you see that they are randomly distributed. What if we could align them similar to what is this spaghetti, to have them all in the same direction? Well, that's some of what some researchers in VVS have done, and it's not as easy as just taking the spaghetti, of course. Instead, we have to have different techniques for that. And what they have used is water, or microfluidics, having the water flow in a very controlled flow. So this is what you see an illustration of. So it's actually just the nanocellulose and water, basically, that makes a material. And what do you get with that? You get the world's strongest biomaterial, that's shown here, this knot. Previously, spider silk was considered the world's strongest biomaterial. And although it is strong, this material is 8 times stronger than spider silk. So perhaps Spider-Man should reconsider using nanocellulose instead. But strength is not the only good thing about nanocellulose. You can do more. So if you would look at this gel, you could, for instance, remove the water and get a network, a 3D network. And then you can get aerogels and foams. It's very lightweight material. And if you would look at it with a microscope, you would see that it contains a lot of air, which explains then, of course, why it is lightweight. So it's easy to picture here on the right. It's actually on a leaf. With this material itself, you get very interesting properties. You can get insulation properties, for instance. But one of the things I think is so interesting about cellulose and non-cellulose is that you could functionalize it and get new properties. So you can consider this aerogels and foams as kind of a material platform to get more types of material, more functionality. So some of the things that researchers have been doing is having them absorb oil. So the red you see here is oil, and afterwards it's totally containing all the oil, or more or less. So this could be used in an oil explosion, for instance. One other thing is that this has a really huge surface area when it comes down to this. And researchers have been developing this into soft batteries. So what you see here on this picture is one type of battery. So then perhaps you could have both insulation material and energy storage in one. And the thing is shown here, where the nanocellulose aerogel is used for desalinate water, making pure drinking water by just using the sunlight. So you can see that the water is going up there. So a lot of, you can use this for a lot of different things. And then I haven't even started to talk about antibacterial or fire resistant and other electronic properties. Not to talk about what you can make with all the other components, cellulose fibers, lignin, and hemicellulose and extractives. but the time is limited now, so I can't talk more about it. But I will say some things about why we are able to do this and how we should go on in the future. All the things that I've shown haven't been possible if we hadn't cooperated. This is where people with different scientific backgrounds, such as chemistry, biology, biotechnology, physics, computers, well, we get together and we're able to form this. So it really goes down to competence. And working together is also something really important, which is make this new materials for the future. And then also about cooperating with universities and with the industry. And that is research is trying to facilitate or help with. So this is a Swedish collaboration platform where we try also to collaborate on research and also this competence for the new materials from the future, from the forest, and to enable future bioeconomy.
Oh, that's so interesting. I'm really excited to see what the future holds. But we have one question here that about this nanocellulose, because some people in the public and the society are a bit scared of this nano size. Mm-hmm. Is there any risk analysis or things like that when you do new products with this nano format?
Of course, we need to make sure that everything is safe when we do this. First, as I said, what we are doing is developing a platform for the future material. When you go to product, you of course must make sure that we don't do the mistakes we previously made, have something harmful. Cellulose in itself is not harmful for humans. It's biocompatible. And there are also some projects that are looking at it. When we modify it in a way, we also introduce new properties, so then we need to evaluate all those things.
Nice. Time is running, and I think we have a lot of questions in the Q&A, but we're answering them as quick as we can, as said. We have one last expert to talk to, and some of your questions is about this subject. We have our last but not least expert joining us today. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Diana Tomasjukka, you're a principal scientist and team lead in sustainable bioeconomy at EFI, European Forest Industry.
Institute.
Institute, sorry, it's not industry, sorry. Institute. Yes, so please.
All right, thank you. I want to thank my previous speakers because you gave some wonderful examples of what you can do with wood. What I'm going to do is I will talk a bit more about wood and forests and how they can contribute sustainably to the circular bioeconomy. As a bit of background, I'm from EFI, the European Forest Institute, and we are an international institute and focusing on connecting science-based knowledge to action. Our vision is where a world is where forests are significantly contributing to sustainable well-being. And we do that by providing the best available research and linking it to the policymakers, to the general public. We have 3 fields of research. One is bioeconomy, one is on resilience, and one is on governance. And with that, I want to talk about the forest-based bioeconomy a bit more generally. Forests are a very important part of the European landscape, with a big diversity from the types of landscapes, forest management, forest traditions throughout Europe. If you're interested in different types of tree species or availability, this map gives a bit of an overview of where are the forests and what are the different tree species. And as we heard before about different trees and different properties and different products, so you can imagine that each type of tree species has got a different potential to be produced for something for the bioeconomy. Currently, if you look at the forest-based bioeconomy, we have forestry, of course. We have wood products and furniture and paper, but then, of course, also the potential of forest to be used in other products as we have assessed. Looking at the current profile of the forest-based bioeconomy, forests amount up to 38% of the total land area, and that means 177 million hectares in Europe. The annual felling rate currently is 66% of the net annual increment, meaning some 458 million cubic meters. Now, these are numbers that may not tell you much, but just to let you know, as forests grow, if you would harvest what is growing each year, so the increment, 100% of the increment, in theory, with a bit of other factors to which I come back later, you would have about the same amount of timber and forest standing. So this basically shows we are using about 2/3 of the annual increment. So there is a potential to increase. Now, this figure, 722 million cubic meters that could be potentially harvested sustainably, is not the total increment, but it is based on studies by Verkerk et al. Calculated with a model called FSN. So it excludes all the protected areas, doesn't touch that at all. It excludes all the fragile sites and all those areas that are not accessible by machinery. So when it comes to the availability of how much timber would be theoretically available, it would be a lot more. Like how and why it is not harvested, that has got different reasons, partially related to willingness to cut, to accessibility, to wood price and similar issues, but it shows we would have a potential to even increase sustainable production. As of now, currently, the contribution of the forest-based industry to the bioeconomy is about 7.3% of the manufacturing in total, and currently employing 3.3 million persons. I would like to spend some time on this admittedly a bit more complicated slide, but I think it is fundamental for understanding like what is the circular bioeconomy, how is it different from the linear fossil-based one, and what are the different driving factors or demand that need to be taken into account for a circular bioeconomy to be successful. And I want to use the example of forests as one of the ecosystems. If what we had so far is mainly a linear economy and a fossil-based one. So you harvest the material, no matter if it's now virgin materials or if it's fossil or something, use it and throw it away. And this system has brought us in a situation that it's not sustainable at all. But we need to change our way of thinking, our way of doing business, and also our way of researching. And that's where the circular bioeconomy comes in. One thing is, yes, the use of biomass, but we're not talking about a one-to-one replacement of fossil with bio-based materials. Yes, we look at virgin materials, but we also look at cascading use of those. So we talk about production of the biomass, using in old and new application, if it's now chemicals or materials, biofuels, into different products. And we heard some examples of what can be done, so pretty much everything. But then part of the new challenge is to design products that have got circularity in already as part of the design, so that at the end of the lifetime it can be either reused or reused in a different setup, or cascaded and or final bird. So this is only part of the circular loop. But that is not all that is part of the circular bioeconomy. Far more important is a more holistic view of the ecosystem. So not of just of the different sectors, of the different functions, but of wood and forests as one big. So with that, I want to talk more about ecosystem services. Some of you may be already familiar with the term, but for those who are not, let me try to open it up a bit. Forests are an ecosystem that are interacting with a lot of the landscapes, but also a lot of different functions in different systems. And in general, you can classify ecosystem services into 3 different categories. One is the provisioning services, of which part is the biomass, but also things like noise control, filtration services, sequestration, genetic materials. Then we have the regulating services, things like climate regulations, flood control, water supply, disease regulation, And last but absolutely not least, the cultural service. If it's now recreational, aesthetic, spiritual, educational, but anything that is of a high importance also for the society, for the well-being of the society. So if we talk about sustainable circular bioeconomy, don't only look at the materials, but also on how the ecosystem, the forests are managed, not only for forest, for wood production, but also for the benefit of the society. This includes also things like services as part of income based on ecosystem services as part of the whole approach to circular bioeconomy. If you want to read a bit more on what ecosystem services are, I recommend to look at the sizes index. So there you have the different functions a bit more explained. Why are ecosystem services so important, particularly under the bioeconomy? It may sound a bit fluffy, like biodiversity or carbon storage, wood for social needs. Even if it's a bit difficult to put values or numbers on it, the importance of the biodiversity, of the ecosystem service, of the different regulation functions is immense. And we will not have a bioeconomy without biodiversity. Something that we have seen very much also in recent times is how important actually biodiversity and recreation is. And I want to show with you for that some figures from the recent COVID lockdown. These are the visiting hours from a forest in cotton forest in Bonn before the COVID lockdown. So you can see you have less than 50 people going regularly in the mornings and in the evenings into that forest recreation, a bit more during the weekends. During the lockdown, you can see that the demand for people going into the forest for recreation, for getting out, for health, for other issues has increased quite immensely. So the usual people were still out, but you can see that the importance of going out has increased quite a lot, and particularly of natural surroundings like forests. So forests and forests have the greatest potential to mitigate climate change while advancing the bioeconomy and enhancing biodiversity. I would like to use the next few slides to explain a bit like how do biodiversity and forest management link together. In very, very general terms, how does forest growth and forest management and forestry work? Trees are influenced in their growth by several factors. The one is the availability of light. The second is the availability of water, the availability of nutrients, and the tree species in the stand. So regardless if it's a natural growing forest without any intervention or an actively managed intense forest, this sort of system is always the same. So you have a certain amount of cubic meters that can grow on a certain area, and how much can grow is limited by, as I said, by the light, the water, the nutrients, and the type of tree species. There is a maximum level that can grow for each forest, and it varies across Europe and across different stands and sites. What forestry now does is it is speeding up this growth process. So in a normal forest, you have the youth phase, the forest is growing, you have the mature phase accumulating, where the growth is accumulating, and then you have the old age phase. But with that also, like any natural system, trees also die. So what forestry does, it is concentrating the growth in that forest on a limited number of trees to make them grow faster, so that you can take that carbon that's stored in the wood product out of the forest and keep it longer in other products like construction, while in the forest the cycle of growth and carbon capture is continuing. Now, how can we include more biodiversity in forest management? One function is to create more diversity, and you can create more diversity at the stand level and at the landscape level. One thing is, of course, tree species. It doesn't mean you need to have all available tree species at one stand, but a good mixture between the stand level diversity and the landscape level. Different ages also advance diversity because they support different species, different functions. And also here a mixture at stand level, but of course also landscape level. Then we have different management regimes, from close to nature to highly intensified managements. Different functions, we have protection functions, recreation functions, production functions. For different user groups, this is important. We have forests not only used by timber production, but we have mentioned already the recreation brings in, of course, also the tourism, or also, let's say, agroforestry concepts and similar ones. And last but not least, different zones. Within one forest or landscape levels, there may be zones that are not accessible or should not be accessible. So managing forests at stand, but also at landscape level for diversity promotes biodiversity, it promotes sustainability, but also resilience and the bioeconomy. Because our forests are facing big threat, including also with climate change, but we have more, let's say, hazardous events, more storms, more droughts, more pine beetle attacks, more forest fires. So we need to manage them, but the more diverse the structures are throughout the landscape and at the stand level, the easier it is to adjust to arrive to climate smart forestry. I've talked a lot about forestry as such, but I also want to give some good examples of harvesting practices. Wood harvesting is very simplified, done in two different ways, either motor manual with the motor saw or by the use of harvesters. I want to highlight the use of harvesters here because they sometimes have a bit unfairly, well, a rather skeptic perception, because you see those big machines in the forest. However, they are actually developed at the highest level to access forests. You can see, for example, carriages with their wheels and boogie bands, everything made to elevate the pressure on the soil, because what we want to reduce as much as possible is soil pressure that might destroy the soil structure, and with that hamper, for one thing, growth, but also increase erosion. From a worker's perspective, machines are very safe. You can imagine that forestry work, if you do it by motor saw, is very dangerous. There's a lot of big volumes, heavy weights overhead that might fall quite unexpectedly. Often trees under tension, especially if you talk about hazardous events like wind throws, we have one tree over the other. So worker safety is very important, and the machines are developed that they the pressure on the soils as big as possible. Also with the cranes, you have a wide reach of about 10 meters to both sides, so you don't need to touch the whole area. The use of skid roads, so basically it means harvester is always driving on the same road, so driving on the same road, not accessing the areas to the sides. And while harvesting, putting the slash, which means the tops and the branches in front of the machine to create a carpet that also helps to elevate the pressure. And different developments on a more digital side is how to avoid crossing over wet areas. Wet soils are very fragile soils, so that is something we want to avoid as much as possible. For instance, Tech for Effect has developed a map for depth water maps that you can have as part of your computer system to show where are the waterways, so where not to cross, or where are the ways to cross better. So there are a lot of good harvesting practices on the digital side, but also on the machine side that help in the harvesting side for the safety of the people who do the work, but also to do the harvesting as gentle as possible. With this, I would like to conclude. Considerations to diversity and biodiversity at stand level and at landscape level are important. The whole ecosystem approach is important to include in a forest-based bioeconomy. The recommendation is to use the best available technology, both in machines, but also in digital support in operations, particularly for considerations to soils. And taking all these aspects into mind, there is a potential to increase the harvesting levels. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you so much. We're having a lot of nice questions here. I would like to ask you how you think we should ensure that these new forest-based materials are produced sustainably while not hampering the development of them, so to say.
Sustainability, if I may go back, has undergone change of definition over the decades. And it started from a very resource-based approach, like not taking more out than is growing after. That was like Kotta and Karlovitz with the industrial waste. And then we came to Brundtland, where you added in more aspects like environmental aspects, then came the social aspects and economic aspects and so on. And all these definitions have made it into the practices in standardization like FSC or PFC, but also into the laws and regulations that we have in the different European countries.
Yes.
So while there are different regulations in Europe, and of course in many other countries worldwide, what is reflected in the legislation at country level is the absolute minimum of how to ensure that it is sustainable. But of course, then forest owners have the option to do a lot more to enhance biodiversity. So that is one way. The other way, when it comes to illegal logging, if I may take this excursion, also there we have legislation in Europe in place that the EU timber regulation that might be, so only legally harvested timber may make it to the European market, and what legal is defined in each country that has got a VPA agreement, and that is also close to the sustainability definition, but of course varies from country to country. So most regulations are in place to ensure an absolute minimum, but then there is also the way of using certification, and on top of that also what each forest owner can do and wants to do.
Yes, thank you. Now I would like, we're running out of time, but I would like that every one of you, our experts, could turn on your camera and have some panel talk with you all. The last thing I would like you to comment on is, of course, this big question. What do you think the role of the forest have in a sustainable society, and how important is it for going into a circular economy in the future? Should we ask Richard first? What do you think?
Well, I think forestry is of course supplying the most biomass all around the world. And today we heard that from the tree a lot of different materials can be made. And I think those materials are really important to sequester carbon dioxide into a material for a longer period. And I think the forestry and also forestry products are really important in a bioeconomy based on the supply from the forestry.
And Katarina, what do you think?
So I think that we have to keep in mind that forest-based biomass is really renewable, and it's really important because we really need this kind of renewable carbon. We need biocarbon. That we cannot use renewable fossil-based carbon as we have done, and to see the forestry forest-based products in that loop, it's essential that we can tackle these challenges. So I would say that, and of course the circularity is the key there as well. So we have to eco-design the products so that those can be recyclable, or if the end-use applications are demanding, then biodegradable or compostable. So that I think that is really essential.
Yes. Josephine, do you have something to add?
I think we need to use the forest. Look at what we have. We can't continue to use the oil. It's definitely not sustainable. When you have a tree that actually takes up the carbon dioxide from the air while it's growing, and it can be grown where we don't compete with food production, and so the forest definitely has potential to help us go to a bioeconomy.
Yes, and and Diana, what do you think is the most important thing for different companies and organizations and to collaborate to this future of a sustainable society in forestry?
I think it's about three different things. The one, as I talked along about, the integration of forest management, ecosystem services, like the management of the resource is important for different user groups. The production of materials, as Katrina said, something that is bio-based, but also reusable, cascadable, and biodegradable. And last but not least, I think it's more towards society. We need to have a change in society where we go to consuming less, longer lasting products, less demands for commercial, and think in that case, forests can contribute in that very well.
Thank you so much. Time is running, and I could talk about this a long time, and we have a lot of questions in the chat. Please continue the discussions, and we are going to answer the questions. We put them in our dialogue zone on the Bloom website, where we can keep on discussing and asking questions. After this seminar, thank you all participators and attendees. We're going to send out a short survey afterwards to see what you think about it. And yes, this was one of several webinars about bioeconomy in our daily lives. So please be updated at the Bloom website about coming ones. We're going to talk about textiles, and we're going to talk about bioplastics in coming ones. So thank you once again. It was really nice to see you all.